Minecraft is one of the most speedrun games ever, with thousands of runners submitting their runs every month. And although watching lonely dudes trying to go as fast as possible in their bedroom, although that might not sound fun, I love to watch and think just how much does a Minecraft speedrun comes down to pure mathematical randomness. Luck, if you will. And before you start commenting the list of diseases that my entire family tree clearly deserves, start saying that your favorite game, Terraria 3D edition, takes no skill, I wanna clarify that of course only the best of the best can get the world record in such a prestigious category, and that my goal with this video is to find out just how much luck you need on top of the world class skill to get a world record in the random seed 1.16 category. Lastly, I want to clarify for research reasons that I try to get every single quantity in this video from my own calculations and lines of codes, and I will leave the code in the description if you are enough of an unemployed to be interested in. And that although I am a god who's always right, I could be messing up. If you have any correction to make, feel free to write a comment, email, or send me a pigeon, and I will make sure to, I don't know, pin it or something. And with that out of the way, we can start our descent into, exploration of the fascinating math behind Minecraft speedruns from, the start. Since when you generate a world, you use a random seed, the run is of course already RNG dependent. In the past, the spawn had its impact, but was not as important, since a world record contender could start in very different ways. At the start of a run, you basically want to get to the Nether as fast as possible with an iron pickaxe to pick up the gold and trade for pearls and some food. You also want a bucket to make the Nether portal without needing obsidian, and a flint and steel to light that bad boy up. All of these items could be obtained with different methods based on your spawn. For example, with villages having lava pools nearby or ruined portals, or in the ocean with treasure chests or shipwrecks with underwater lava pools. Heck, at some point there was a strat called hyper-modern, involving kidnapping a cow and stealing gold from an underwater temple, like you do in real life. But because of high competition, the run has become extremely optimized, to the point where you can't even begin the run if you don't have a very precise set of conditions. In particular, you have to spawn near a coast and find a buried treasure chest, because that's the most efficient way to get all the iron necessary. You might say, how much different can it be going for a shipwreck? Well, I checked the 20 fastest run of the category, and only 2 of them started with a shipwreck, with the fastest of them being a 7 minute and 38 second completion. Even so, the run was extremely lucky for having a shipwreck spawning right beside your spawn point on the coast near a ruined portal. But wait, it is not even guaranteed that a treasure chest has those sexy 7 iron. For starters, Minecraft Java Edition has a very inconvenient 0.6112% chance for a treasure chest not to have any iron ingot. And I just have a feeling that at some point the Mojang dev team must have had a conversation while deciding these odds that went like, welcome speedrunners. But going back to numbers, the average amount of iron ingots that you can get from a buried treasure chest is 9.29. But remember, we are not looking on average. We want to know the chances of getting at least 7 iron ingots. To calculate this, let's quickly see how Minecraft decides what a loot chest will contain. When a chest is generated, what Minecraft does is it draws different items from various pools with different distributions. For example, for the treasure chest, there is a pool with minerals and TNT, a pool for cooked salmon, and one for armors and weapons, and so on. Each pool has different probabilities for each item to be chosen. Again, considering the mineral pool for the treasure chest, we have a 20 out of 35 chance that each draw give us irons, 10 out of 35 for gold, 5 out of 35 for TNT, and we do 5 to 8 draws. To make it easier, imagine having a sack with 35 marbles in it, where 20 of them are white, 10 are yellow, and 5 are red. Every time you draw, you write down what you got and replace the marble that's now missing, and you draw 5 to 8 times. Well, congratulations, you are now basically Minecraft. Now, since when we draw iron, it can be stacks of 1 to 4 ingots per draw, we need to calculate the odds of getting 7 iron. And doing every single combination would pretty much beat suicide, so I ended up simulating the event over and over again, find out the probability of getting less than 7 iron, aka a Monte Carlo. In my code, I've simulated the generations of the iron in a chest 10 million times, and turns out there is a 73.5 chance of getting 7 or more ingots. So already more than 1 in 4 lucky runs where you spawn near a beach a skill like this. That's what I would have said if you didn't have a 15.484 chance of finding diamonds, which allows you to have a diamond pickaxe and only need 4 more. Yeah, this is gonna be a pain in the ass to calculate. Since the pool from which diamonds and iron are drawn are different, they are 2 independent phenomena, but the 2 conditions are not independent. Basically, if we have 7 iron, part of the second condition is already met, which means I have to calculate the probability of us getting 4 iron and 3 diamonds, or the probability of getting 7 iron combined. Now, I could probably use something like the bias rule, the conditional probabilities, which would take like hours to figure out, but thanks to this code that totally didn't take me a whole day to write down, we can simulate 10 million treasure chests and see what is the likelihood of at least one of the two conditions to be positive. Which turns out, after an hour of my i7 burning, we get a 76.53% chance of having at least one of the two conditions being met. Now, although this is an empirical result, the number could be off by at most a couple of hundreds, so that seems good enough. So it turns out that countless run dies immediately before even starting, and once you start, you have a 25% chance of it dying in the first 20 seconds. It's all starting to sound like making kids in China. I also did calculations for the shipwrecks, but honestly, we can save them. They're in the code if you're interested. And since finding at least 4 cooked fishes in the treasure is guaranteed, we are going to assume that you won't need any more food for the rest of the run. The world record herder drip lost only 11 hunger bars drumsticks before going to the hand, so the bare minimum of 4 should get the job done. And you could even find animals, living fish or hoglings in the Nether for food, so we can confidently ignore this definitely not excuse. No, not at all. But wait, we also need wood, and since lately environmentalism is becoming mainstream, as it should, we don't want to lose viewers because we punched a tree. So the only faster solution used in almost every top run is making them blow up with a TNT that can conveniently be found in the same pool as iron. And to calculate that, we have to introduce multidimensional binomial distribution. But to make it easy for my tiny brain, this means that we can account for drawing 2 different items from the same pool. And now the chance has already started to get slim, since you only have a 56% chance. Already, half of the runs are slowing down compared to the world record contender. At least the chest spawns always in the same location. In every chunk there is one, where a chunk is a 16 by 16 portion of the world and the treasure spawns near the 9-9 block. And since you can use a magic chart that lets you see if there are block entities like chests, beds, and enchanting tables and so forth, we don't have to worry about calculating chances of finding it. Thank God. Now, if you were to do a run where you're not aiming for a world record, even getting 6 iron or no TNT is acceptable, since you can light up the portal with lava and you can break trees by hand. But for a world record contender pace, you need to find the sexy iron and that explosive sand. Maybe finding a shipwreck near spawn with a treasure chest could be enough, but it starts to get pretty unlikely. And just like my videos, it will be a waste of time. I still left the calculation in the code. So after getting this and a few blocks of wood, we are now ready to find an underwater lava pool, which is not that rare by itself, but it's not that common. So speedrunners have somehow optimized the search. I think that the process is, and I didn't find confirmation, so please comment section help me, that since Minecraft first generated the ocean seafloor, it creates the seagrass and the kelp, and then decides, yes, let's add a bit of red, and it breaks down the kelps, making them rise to the surface, becoming entities. And now by pressing F3 plus B, you can see eat boxes and find them easily, and boom, ravine found. Now, is it just me, or is my degree easier than this shit? Okay, now you have everything you need to go to the Nether, you finish your portal, you finish your portal and enter the Nether. The Nether is probably the most important part of your run, and the place where the majority of them will inevitably die. See, the Nether is tricky, because you need to find a bastion to get ender pearls by trading with the piglings with the gold you just stole from them, hence why I call it the Romanian cycle, and the Nether fortress to get the blaze rods and make the Eye of Enders, both close enough to your entry portal. And the way they spawn is pretty weird. In fact, both structures are more likely to spawn in areas non-orthogonal from the Nether central point. I'm so happy that we're only 9 minutes into the video and we are already introducing linear algebra. To make this clear, let's imagine that you make your Nether portal and it takes you to the Nether coordinates 0, 0. What Minecraft does is separating the dimension into 864 by 864 squares, and this area into another 4 squares with sides of length 432 blocks, which only the higher left 368 by 368 area can generate either a bastion or another fortress. So if you went, per se, in a straight line in front of you, assuming you're facing north, the likelihood of you seeing a bastion are reduced compared to you going diagonally, since the region on your left is non-eligible to make a bastion spawn, thus giving us a base rule for life: don't be too straight. Wait, what? Although they cannot spawn in the same area, Minecraft allows the generation of both structures to continue in those 4 non-spawn eligible chunks, which means that they can still be very near, though it's unlikely. Also, bastions can't spawn in basalt deltas because fuck them, I guess. Since every 368 by 368 area has a 3 out of 5 chance of having a bastion, the chances of the 4 squares not having a single bastion is 2.5%, which is not that high, but it's also not zero. Runners almost always start from looking at the bastion, since they want to get the pearls first to traverse the nether faster. Overall, finding a bastion can be quite tricky, but thanks to other F3 menu shenanigans, you can locate them fairly easily. Since bastions mobs spawn before other peasants mobs when a chunk is loaded, by pausing right after you enter the nether, if you notice spikes in the entity variable number, it probably means that a bastion is being loaded nearby in the direction you're looking. Once you find a bastion, all you need to get are 72 strings to make 6 beds, and this is an overestimation just to be sure, since there is a fast technique used to kill the ender dragon called zero cycle, more on that later, that requires a minimum of 5 beds, while normal runs theoretically needs at least 4, but there is a possibility that the runner messes up, especially under pressure. Also, you can obtain crying obsidian from chests and bartering with piglins, which can be crafted into explosives, so it should be more than enough to kill a poor mother protecting a rag. Finally, if we have a bit more gold, I will bump it up to 84 strings, but don't worry, it never happens. We also need 16 pearls. Again, we are being generous since the ender eyes could break themselves and ender pearls are used to travel faster. We will also see the odds of a more comfortable number of 20 and in extreme cases with 14 pearls, though this is quite literally the bare minimum. But in all the top speedruns, pearls are used to travel quickly, especially towards the fortress, so I believe 16 is fair. Please don't kill me in the comment section if you don't agree. And finally, 20 blocks of obsidian to make 2 portals, one for getting the coordinates of the stronghold using trigonometry, can't wait to add that one to the video, and the other to travel quickly, because as you probably know, 1 block of distance in a nether corresponds to 8 in the overworld, so it's faster to translate the end fortress coordinates in nether coordinates and travel through hell. Now, if you think that my assessments are dog shit and that a blind baboon jumping on the keyboard could be better than me, well, first of all, you. And second of all, I left the code in the description. If you want to change the condition, you totally can, if you manage to navigate that hell that is. Now, with that out of the way, let's go back to torture, math. Since Mojang specifically hates me, I thought it would be a great idea to not only make 4 different types of bastions, rich, stable, house and treasure, but to make it so that each type has different amount of gold blocks that, just like my friends after I take the pills, are not always guaranteed to spawn. So to make this, let's first calculate the average case scenario for the amount of gold we can get based on the world record routes and speedrunning tutorials I saw. By the way, since bastion structure always generate the same besides gold blocks and some small details, speedrunners have figured out the fastest way to enter the bastion, collect the pearls and optimal spots to trade. And these are called routes. Why do we need to prepare a route for getting this much gold? Because piglins have a relatively low chance to trade them for pearls, so you want the highest chance of getting all the requirements for a run while minimizing the time spent. So we need to steal lots and quick. We'll now explain the numbers of bridge, and for the rest of the types I will go over quickly because this is my video and I do whatever the fuck I want. The strategy for the bridge is somewhat easy. You mine the 16 blocks here and boom, you're done. You will also loot the chest at the top after following a path that traps piglins inside of a hole. These chests here contain an average of 2.18 gold ingots each. Editing Sama here. I failed to mention that since bridge has already a very high amount of gold, I won't consider the chest gold in this bastion, only in this one, but I will consider them for obsidian and strings. Also, chests can generate in groups of 3 or 1, but don't worry, I will later explain the code that I use, and subscribe if you think that this video was a mistake. So we can safely ignore calculating an estimate for the gold in the various amount of chests. But Sama, you could have 5 more ingots. So we can now see what are the chances of us getting pearls. By looking at these odds on the wiki, there are now 459 chances of dropping 2 to 4 ender pearls from gold ingot. It should be hard to get consistently 16 pearls, since you're not Dream. But if we speedrun the game in the 1.16.1 version, where there were no tariffs, yes, so I made a political economical joke, and what's left? Oh no, we get double the odds for more pearls. Precisely a 20 out of 423 chance of getting pearls for each ender pearl. In the bridge bastion with 134 ingots, assuming you use 9 of them for protection by distracting the piglins with the gold like the government distracts you with this video. Wake up James, wake up! We have 135 ingots left. And with them, you have a little over an 85 chance of getting 20 pearls. But just like with the buried treasure chest, we have to also check a second condition. Since to calculate bartering quantities, Minecraft recycled the metal used for loot chests as I recycle my code, we could calculate the theoretical distribution by doing 50 damn probability function calculation or use another Monte Carlo. And guess which one your boy chose? Don't worry, we will use the binomial probability distribution for blazers, so we will see that later. This time though, the pool from which ender pearls and strings are drawn is the same, so they are not independent, just like iron and TNT. And we have to take notice of that by using a trinomial distribution again. And after all of this, the chances of us getting at least 84 strings and 20 pearls with 135 gold is only 65.15%. Now, speedrunners can and often do make things work with what they have, even if the situation isn't ideal. If we lower our numbers to 72 strings for the 6 beds and 16 pearls, we have a 28% chance that a lucky world record pace where the buried treasure chest was near spawn, and with the right loot, you find an underwater ravine near spawn, you find the bastion quickly enough, and you didn't mess up anything major, dies here in the bastion, since you have a 72% chance of getting all of the condition with this amount. And even if you were to continue, you wouldn't be able to travel quickly into the fortress, messing up the cycles, and you can't even risk the eyes of Ender breaking themselves. Actually, I am a piece of shit because I forgot that you can also find strings in chests. Now, there is a 31% chance that if you get all the possible draws for string, 1 of 125 to the power of the number of chests you found, and get 6 chests, which is a 25% chance, you should be able to make a couple more bets, but realistically speaking, if you get lucky around 20% of the time, you should be able to make another single bet. To solve this problem, we are going to use this bed, since it's spare, as a way to blow out the blocks around the blade spawner, and we'll leave it at there. Please don't make me go back for an average 2.1 strings per chest. Please, I'm begging you. Wait, dude, I just realized that later I have to talk about spawning mechanics. Can I wait for that one? This is someone from 1 month later. Hi, and I'm still a big dum-dum. So originally, I didn't count for the chance of obsidian. So here's the chance that a lucky run with good trades doesn't get enough obsidian, which is 20 because this way we can make a portal to get the coordinates of the stronghold in order to travel there. And I also fixed the strings while I was at it. This took another afternoon, of course. Turns out that obsidian is a huge problem. Now, if you look at the average of obsidian we get, that might seem confusing. But since when it drops, it gives from 4 to 6 obsidian. If you happen to find it in a chest, you are more likely to hit the quota. As a matter of fact, if you have at least one single chest draw of obsidian, you have a 42.19% chance of getting at least 20 obsidian, while if you get 0, the chances are 6.2%. So we now get that bastions are a lot more volatile than what it seems like. If you don't get the chest roll, your world record run is now over. Overall, the chance of leaving with enough stuff is only 29% of the time, but the biggest make or break are probably the chests. Since I don't know if I'm losing my sanity faster than my will to live, let's go back to the other bastions. Not too late, Sama. You can always just close off the video, delete the file, and nobody will ever have to know. So for the treasure route, the amount of gold blocks is not always the same. There are 2 that spawns on the bridge that links the cube in the rampart, 2 on the middle section, and 12 in the highest part. I've heard a lot of people say that these blocks have around a 70% chance of appearing, but looking at the structure data, there wasn't a single clue that led to that conclusion. The misunderstanding on my hand here comes from the fact that I naively thought since there are 16 locations where 12 blocks always spawn, if you were to check any single location, you might think you have a 75% chance to find a single one. That's only true when you check the first location. Once you have this information, there are 15 more slots where 12 gold blocks can spawn if there wasn't a single one in the first location. That's making the chances higher at 12 out of 15 by sort of removing a degree of freedom. But by looking at various runs with treasure routes, the blocks didn't actually all spawn. So I'm conflicted with what to do, because it is very likely that I might have interpreted something wrong, but it could be that the wiki doesn't mention a detail. Plus people like Cornway, Recrap and K4 all said in their video that the blocks do have a 70% chance of spawning. And dude, I feel sorry for the me of the future who is going to find out the solution. To prove that, I would have to calculate a statistical test, and come on, at this point I already wasted the past 2 weeks calculating silly stuff on a Lego sandbox, and not even I would do something this stupid. So I spent 2 hours loading more than 100 treasure bastions and counting by hand the amount of gold blocks that spawn on the uppermost section. With this data in mind, I did something that is called a statistical hypothesis. Now I won't go into details with how it works, since I kid you not, it took me 4 months of university lectures to understand it, but just know that it uses mathematical functions of distribution to calculate probabilities of a parameter being in an interval. Yeah, and statistical nerds out there, I know this isn't perfect, there might be a better solution. I'm not that good, but get the PhD out of here, I'm doing my best, okay? And now, the moment we were all waiting for. According to my calculation, it should not be a value among the 70% range. But again, what do I know? It is more likely than I misinterpreted something, and I honestly trust the opinions of people who have done it for years at this point, rather than one of my sorry ass.
6.5 hours later.
Oh, JK, I found the answer. Yeah, turns out there are only 6 spawns for gold blocks, not 7 for each part of the rampart, because one of them seemed to be in the lower half and the location of spawn are not specified on the wiki. And if you know anyone who wrote the wiki, make sure to tell them that they should start to be more cautious of, any 1995 dark rate 7,000 pounds Toyota Tacoma TDR Pro parked near their house. Is this a threat or an advice? You decide. The changing the hypothesis from being a 70% of 7 draws to a 70% of 6 makes it so our sample actually confirms the hypothesis and everyone is happy, except me who wasted a real life day on a 7. I have to warn you though, this does not prove without a doubt that the probability is 0.7. I want to make this abundantly clear. It's like an index that says it seems you're going in the right direction. There is still a low chance that we just got lucky and confirmed a false hypothesis, although this chance again is fairly low. Wait, what was this section all about? Oh yeah, bastions. So by assuming we have a 70% chance, we can simulate millions of bastions, each with its own case, and get a grasp of how many of them have a happy ending. And the results were quite shocking. Only 19.26% of runs make it past this point, with at least 16 pairs, 72 strings, and 20 obsidian. Lowering the condition of pairs to 14, which I do believe is the absolute bare minimum, makes the chance only at 20%. I don't know why, but at this point, I felt like that time I failed the autism test. Like I know it's right, but let me check one more time just to be sure. So I went paranoid for an entire day checking. I don't even know how many times I tried, but even the theoretical ratios from the game data were equal, so I guess it's right. But why is it so low? Well, again, the obsidian seemed to be the deciding factor, since in this bastion only 4 chests can spawn, while before on bridge you could have up to 6, and you get a lot less gold on average, meaning less trades. In my calculations, I had 5 gold ingots as protection, but it honestly could be higher. Overall, the chance of the pairs being more than 16 is 85.40%. For the strings being more than 72, we have 66.7%, but having more than 20 obsidian only happens 34.6% of run. Not only that, but when you want to satisfy all the conditions, you have a negative correlation between them, which means the likelihood of all 3 of them being satisfied is lower than the product of the 3 chances, which would be around 19.7%, of course higher than 19.26. This makes sense because if a draw gives you, let's say, pearls, it can give you another material, and vice versa, of course. I will now explain the numbers of breach, and for the rest of the types I will go over quickly because this is my video and I do whatever the fuck I want. So that was a fucking lie. I swear I'll try to be quicker this time. In the house bastion, there are 2 main routes, the one which starts from the low and the one which starts from the top, but in both of them you essentially end up in the same position because the gold blocks are underground here. But somehow, what about the ones on the outside? We are speedrunners, dude. We don't go outside. And generally speaking, runners don't go for it because they are rare and extremely luck dependent. In the route from below, you can collect only 3 chests efficiently. And from the get-go, I have to warn you, this bastion is much more volatile than the 2 we have seen so far. Comparing house bastion to treasure, it's like comparing donkey to a fucking content creator. I waited years to make that reference, please subscribe. And it's all because in this route, you only get 9 gold blocks. Look at this average, 135 ingots on bridge, 112 of treasure, which seemed bad, but 81 on house? Because of that, I will take into account the gold ingots and blocks that come from chests, even though it's extremely unlikely because we need all the help we can get. And assuming we are not protecting ourselves with gold, the average is 87, which is still garbage, but whatever. The results are incredibly terrible. With the requirements of 16 pearls, 72 strings for 6 beds and 20 obsidian, you have a 5.3% chance to get them from the gold ingots. And I know what you're thinking. Still way higher than the chances of me getting a girlfriend. The main problem here are both strings, for which the 72 mark is hit around half of the time, and the obsidian, of which you have 20 only 16.9% of the time. Now, although I'm not sure if this would fly in a world record speedrun, since this would lose a lot of time, let's see what would happen if you were to also loot the top chests. And quick note, there are 3 possible generations for the top part of the housing bastion, called towers. One with 3 chests, one with 1 chest, and one with 0. And there are 2 towers that that can spawn for each housing bastion. Now, this makes a lot of difference. If you're lucky and high roll all the 7 chests that can spawn plus the 3 that are guaranteed, you have more than a 70% chance of getting to 20 obsidian. And on average, you have a 41% chance of leaving the bastion with the right amount of everything if you also loot the top part. The way I calculated this was simulating 1,000,000 casings for each of the 9 possible chest scenarios and doing a weighted average. Oh, come on! And looking at the odds, we can feel the difference between going to loot the chests on top or not going. Though we will stick to the average case, so we have around a 16.8 or 9% chance of leaving the bastion with everything you need. Overall, that's still somewhat bad, because we have to realize that this means only 1 in 6 good runs makes it past this point on track, and this is like the chance of finding a math student who knows what hygiene means. And honestly, if you're a bit unlucky, you might as well restart here. The other route for housing is basically the same, except we start from the top, so we never loot the chest outside, but we have to rerun everything with 1 less chest, but we loot faster. Here I claim the code a bit, because let's just say in a very theoretical situation that the one before was made using a 444 loop, you know, theoretically, and I made a matrix where we can easily see what are the chances based on the numbers of chests. And just look at that obsidian condition probability. Might as well call that shit GameStop post Reddit the way it's falling down. Again, the probability of you getting out of the housing bastion with what you need if you don't loot the chest outside is on average around 14.5%. Yo, there is a new top 3 Minecraft speedrun here. That's crazy, let's check it out in real time. Let's see what happens. Like, I'm so happy, I've just finished the house bastion. I hope to see like some very good routing. Like, I hope nothing bad happens to my calculation and overthrows 6 months of hard work. I really hope that. Oh look! It's a house bastion, you can see that from the top. Nice. He's gonna probably just get this chest and then go down, get the 8 blocks, and you know how it goes basically. 9 blocks, sorry. But you get the point. Going down. Amazing. He's going so well right now. Wait, why is he? No, 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 no. Why? Why? No. I have to rerun all of my calculations. No. If this is a top 3, that means it's fast enough. Oh my god, I hate you. Why now? I just finished editing all of it. What's your name? What's your name? Lodlow. I hope you fucking die in a car accident. So yeah, congratulations Ludlow for your top 3 speedrun. You ruined my life without even knowing I existed. Now we just, you know, rerun all of the code with 1 less chest since he didn't pick the one outside, so just as before, but with 3 more cold blocks. And again, here are the results. Although it was annoying to go back now in November after 4 months of not diving deep into the code, I hope I was able to be more precise. And I know I'm overreacting. New routes are like predators in the Minecraft community. There's always one to be found. I know that right now you're thinking, Soma, you're so sexy and I should subscribe. But for the sake of the script, you're actually thinking, Soma, but this amount of variability is insane. Why would Mojang ever do this? Don't worry, little Timmy. The worst is yet to come, because finally we have this. Now, I don't know whose deranged psychopath, probably French serial killer ideas this was, but we should just remember, Mojang, that sometimes we all make mistakes. Besides me, because I'm flawless. The important thing is owning up to them, and admitting we messed up, so lock that man down immediately. Remember how we had 9 different cases of the top half of the house bastion generations? Well, now we have 27, and I think, wait, let me check. This bastion is the definition of a high roll. You basically have to hope that you get lucky. Actually, there are 3 variants of the top half and 2 variants of the low half. So in reality, there are a total of 108 combinations possible. Damn, maybe Mojang just hate me. You stupid! Now, in a video that Corey did a while ago about how to speedrun, he mentioned that if you wanted a world record pace, the best way to do the stable bastion was to get a high roll on an extremely risky route that involved only one of the towers with a precise type of generation. And there is another which is slower but more reliable and requires another type of precise generation that I have to calculate the odds of. I love my life. Although I believe that a world record pace is far more likely with a faster route, I will, just to be sure, calculate the odds of both of them. Stable bastions are composed of two halves, the stable side, which gets kept almost as hard as a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship, and the rampart side, with all the gold and chests. As I said earlier, the rampart side has 3 towers, and each can be divided in top and bottom half. Both the top half and the bottom half can generate in different ways. In the risky route, you want to in particular to see at least one of the top parts spawning with a high tower, which has 3 chests and 4 gold blocks. That's it. You're banking on those 4 blocks to give you enough pearls, strong obsidian and strings, and hope to find a normal obsidian from the chest. That's why you really want 2 or even all of the tower to generate like this. So you have a very good 12 blocks and 9 chests, which is basically just like the best situation in a house bastion. Now these are the probability of coming out of the bastion with the right materials if you were to take the top route no matter what, based on finding 1, 2 or 3 high towers. And we can easily see that going for this strat with only 1 tower is literal suicide. It works only in 1 in 100 seed, but this does not count the amount of time a high tower didn't spawn, and also the probability of only 1 tower or 2 towers spawning are not the same as 3 towers. So for that reason, we need to do another weighted average. The results are honestly way lower than what I imagined. Since 30% of the time you get 0 towers and 44% of the time you only get 1, the weights favor the roll probabilities. The YouTube short version is, if you were to always do this strat, you would have a 1.57% chance of completing the bastion. Even if we were doing this only when we saw at least 1 high tower, you would have around a 4.7% chance of getting out of the bastion. And since we are in an extreme situation, we can account for the drops for crying obsidian and glowstone that makes an item, the respawn anchor, that explodes just like a bed. In an entire bastion route, you might get 1 if you are lucky, mostly because the glowstone drops are not that high. But again, we're in extreme circumstances, so this way we can lower the string condition, even though it still makes it extremely volatile as a route. But we're going to see the results of this addition after we also consider the bottom half. Now for the bottom, lower route, we need only 1 good bottom to generate, which makes things a bit easier, since we already know that 25% of bastion will spawn with no good bottom. Multiplying this with the probability that the bastion doesn't have a high tower, and already we have an 8% chance of clicking the restart button. There's nothing we can do. Even if you were to have a single tower, I probably don't need to remind you that the chances of you getting past a single tower is 1 in 100. So realistically speaking, there is almost an 18% chance that your run will be much like my YouTube career once Nintendo wants to sell big Yoshi plushies. Completely over. For the remaining 75%, we have a solid although slow route. But how many gold blocks spawn? Well, I have no fucking idea, since the wiki once again forgot to do its job. Now, any sane normal person will probably look over this and not waste his well-deserved time. But come on, it's already been almost 30 minutes into the video. If you think I am a functional member of society, just close off the video already. I don't even need to tell you that I spent 2 hours generating stable bastion and counting by hand the amount of gold blocks, and this time I recorded it, and you're seeing it in the background. Thank you, Minecraft Wiki. So yeah, 143 stable bastion is not a super big sample, but it should give significant results. The blocks are divided into 2 groups. One where 4 blocks can spawn, and the other where 6 blocks can spawn. Now since I saw a lot of combination, I don't think there is a single block that is always 100% going to spawn, but I do believe that the chances of them spawning is higher than 70%. I will do this analysis first by treating every single block individually, and then by doing a group analysis. For the individual blocks, same hypothesis test as before, and this seems to confirm the hypothesis that we have a 90% spawn rate. Again, I have to warn you, this does not prove at all that the probability is 0.9, though I will use this quantity since we need it, and it probably isn't too far from the real value. But we have to check if this hypothesis holds per group, since it could be that one group has such a higher spawn rate than another and it effectively averages out, like a regular 9-to-5 worker and a YouTuber bring contributions to society. And as it turns out,
it seems not to
be the case. Now, the first group is a smaller sample, so it's bound to be more volatile. So take this with a grain of salt, since I am a moron and I could be messing up every single analysis. Overall, 90% seems a decent enough result to finally start the calculations. This part of the video is the one that I am the least confident in. We are speculating, and simply putting it in fancy terms, I'm kinda pulling this one out of my ass. The math behind it seems convincing, but it's not at all a proof. So if you know the actual values and spawn chances, please leave them in the comment section down below and I will address it in the future. So we generated the bastion, obtained the ones with at least a good bottom, 75% of them, and removed those without at least 2 good tops. We expected 55% of them to remain by using the binomial distribution used earlier, and that's what happened. The average of gold in this bastion, including the chests on top, which have a big impact since we are usually checking around 6 or 7. So was that tough? No? Sorry, I'm gonna go back to editing. Anyway, the amount of gold we get from checking the chest is around 91, which is not the best, but we can work with that. Now, around 12% of the total routes were satisfying enough to live with 16% yada yada yada. Once again, obsidian seemed to be the biggest problem in the process. Only 25% of the run actually manages to get enough of it. And now we want to take respawn anchor into consideration, so I rebuilt the entire trade function just for stables. And just like my computer, keeping my 59,000 tabs open, Table Bastion really need all the app they can get. Which is why this video is sponsored by Opera G. I'm kidding, don't skip the video please, I need my ad revenue. By the way, I also had to account for glowstone trades and yeah, it was a mess. To make a single spawn anchor, we need 6 cryom obsidian and 12 glowstone dust for the craft, plus another 4 to make it explode. And by getting the averages for both prying obsidian and glowstone from the trades, the same 500,000 bastions we simulated earlier, we get respectively 36 cryom obsidian and 24 glowstone dust. And this is before we check if we have enough obsidian and pearls. The odds of living with 5 beds instead of 6 and 1 respawn anchor is about 16.5%, which is still garbage because again, 6 in 7 runs, I swear god, still dies here, the same fate that those who don't subscribe will face. With this, we finally ended the Bastion saga, and we are only halfway through. I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel!
Bombaclat wallahi.
Now, after stealing gold from people who only live in a ghetto and reselling it to them for valuables, wait, we are finally set to enter the Nether fortress. If you paid any attention to what I said earlier instead of looking at your recommended, you know that every single Nether subspace has a chance of spawning either a bastion or a fortress. And the odds of the structure spawning in a 432 by 432 square are precisely 3 out of 5 for the bastion, and again, if there's basalt you are left with nothing, at least in a 1.16.1 version, right Kemen? So the chances that out of the 4 squares around none have a single fortress are precisely at 13%, but thanks again to some F4 black magic, we can locate the direction of spawner in our render distance, making fortress easy, for our record runner at least, to find even if they are a bit far away. Now it's time to talk about blazes. Thanks to K4 who made a brilliant video on blades and spawner mechanics, I found this mod called log mod that lets you see probabilities for spawning blazes based on the free space around. Anyway, now I basically have to understand how to find the only parameter or the so-called Poisson distribution that matters, called lambda. If what log mod tells us is indeed true and the spawner mob generation really follows a Poisson distribution, our job is done. We just calculate the probabilities with a normal spawner and a mind one out and we are good. A particular property of the Poisson distribution is that it averages is always equal to the lambda parameter that I told earlier. Problem is, how the fuck we have a 1.71 here, brother? Like, are we on drugs? Why am I even asking? Although I still believe that this lambda is a function of both the light level and the number of empty blocks around the spawner, I simply didn't have a real means, get it? To understand their spawn. Again, if you're smarter than me, and let's be real, you probably are, and you can also read the Minecraft source code, you might be screaming from your basement looking at this, and oh, would you look at that, the comment section has a feature where you can write. Yeah, if we don't touch the spawner, this is what we have to work with, a Poisson distribution with this lambda parameter. But Minecraft players can't seem to leave miners nor spawner untouched. So in every good speedrun you will see runners blow up a TNT or a bed to get rid of the blocks around the spawner. This explosion is not only to remember the losses and as an historical reenactment of what J. Slat did in 1999 in Watertown, Jefferson County, US, but also because the blazes spawn in a 9x9 square around it, and by having blocks we reduce the chance of that happening. And this has a pretty big impact. We go from an average of 1.7 blades per wave to 2.1, so I ended up building my own function that generates the number of blazes that spawn in each wave using the probability suggested by the mod. I've done this for a normal blade spawner and one where you blow up a TNT or bed. Alright, so we know that the spawner waits from 10 to 40 seconds to spawn one wave after another, and assuming that every tick, a 20th of a second, is equiprobable, we know that in 2 to 3 waves we will only get 6 blazes. But how comes that most runs lives after only 2 waves? Are they stupidly lucky and get the rods quickly? Well, in every top run I've seen, the runner usually gets lucky with the blades drop and kill a couple of naturally spawned blades, so they only need to clear 1 or 2 waves of the spawner. Essentially, they either get lucky with the spawner or compensate while going around looking for innocent blazes families on their Sunday's picnic. So now we have a somewhat wide idea of the number of blazes the runner has to kill. But what are the chances of them dropping a rod? 50%. a straight coin flip. Since we need 6 blaze rods, we basically have to win 6 coin flips as fast as possible to get out of the nether as soon as we can. It's hard to track how many blazes we will encounter since, as I said, they can also naturally spawn on the nether fortress itself. Let's estimate that on average we encounter 3 to 4 blazes naturally, and we wait for the rest of them at the spawner. Since we know that a blaze has a 50-50 chance of dropping a rod, we use the binomial distribution. This basically tells us the odds of a certain number of extraction of an object with a certain probability, in this case 0.5, and takes into consideration all the permutation. What are permutation, you might ask? Well, quick test. If you have 3 blades, what are the chances of you getting at least 1 rod? 87.5%. It seems way off, but let's count, shall we? We have 3 scenarios in which a blade drops 1 and the other all drop 0. Not 1, because it's like extracting 3 times. It could be the first blaze to drop 1, the second, or the third. We have 3 scenarios where 2 of them drop for the same reason as earlier. 1 where they all drop, and 1 where none of them drop. We have to account for all the possible permutations of this event, and weigh the result based on these. I know it's a bit much to follow, but please stay with me for a second. So there are 8 possible scenarios, and wow, would you look at that? There is this magic item called binomial coefficient that calculates exactly that for each amount of extraction. Okay class, now that we know how this function works, calculate the mass of the sun. Going back to the video, we essentially have to calculate the binomial where instead of 3 blazes, we have the number of we estimated for both the spawner and the natural generation. I checked the top 10 fastest runs and they have an average of 0.6867 rods, oh my god, 67 again, rods per blazes. Thus meaning that they were very lucky and saved a lot more time than the others. This also means that out of the average 9 blazes killed, a top contender run would have to get about 6 rods. This comes only 25.4% of the time, and this time it's on Monte Carlo, so it should be a precisely 25.4%. 3 out of 4 good runs that I had a very good execution, lucky buried treasure chest, fantastic spawn near an underwater ravine, bastion near 0-0 and a fortress nearby, loses time here. To be honest, killing blaze has probably the most variance time-wise of all the other things in this run, so really take this with a grain of salt. I would love to get the opinion of a top level runner to see his or her, no I'm kidding, of course only his, thoughts on the matter, but yeah. Also, I kind of replayed the role of the spawner since there are a couple of runs that basically don't care about damage, just goes to 200 pump every single blade on side, but I think I did a decent job putting it. Also, the smart thing I saw is when waiting for the next wave of blazes, for example how Drip did between the second and third wave, speedrunners, instead of procrastinating and opening YouTube while doing their homeworks, they build a portal to go to the overworld and start throwing ender eyes to locate the fortress thanks to a calculator, allowing it to save time, and this leaves us to the penultimate stretch of this mess. After we got the blades rods from the nether, the last thing we need is to look at the end fortress. The reason we need 20 obsidian is because we need to go to the overworld, throw an eye, get the probability of the location of the stronghold, go back to the nether to travel 8 times faster since, again, moving 1 block in the nether is equal to moving 8 blocks in the overworld, to the estimated location of the fortress, build another portal there, and finally enter the stronghold. But excuse me Soma, how does the calculator work? Well, now that only true virgins are watching this, I can get into the most difficult thing we have to understand, the Stronghold calculator. In particular, we are going to use the Ninja Brain bot, I swear this is the real name, made by a runner with a math PhD, and I know what you're thinking, and yes, the only grass he ever touched was in Minecraft. The basic premise is that strongholds always generate in various circular crowns with centers in the 0-0 coordinates, with each circle having more portals the further you go out, and they always spawn at angles equal to each other. This doesn't mean that their distance from the center is equal, but the angle between them is. There are actually 2 methods to track down the portal, one which is easier but of course slower, and the other which is more complex and of course faster. The first method, the slow one, involves throwing 2 ender eyes, and we get 2 lines that point towards the closest chunk where a stronghold originated. By simply calculating the intersection of those 2 lines, thanks to the angle, we are easily able to find the position and even the distance of the stronghold. Since between those 2 lines only 1 point will be in common, and don't you try making non-Euclidean jokes. The problem comes when we want to find it with only 1 eye, which is the second method. Of course, the downside is that this method requires a lot more precision. This is the 1 eye stronghold calculation. Now I have to make a confession. After 5 hours of looking at Ninja Brain bot's paper, if I have to be honest, I understood the general process behind the algorithm, and I will explain this, but I don't have the knowledge in trigonometry and Bayesian statistics to understand this masterpiece. Because I respect this work so much, I don't want to pull shit out of my ass. But going back to the method, to mitigate the precision issue, we need a level of precision that reduces the standard deviation of the error. So in plain English, we need to be super precise, like to be hundreds of degrees precise. That's why before throwing an eye, the runner jumps into a boat and this resets the crosshair, making it accurate to 6 decimals instead of the usual 2 allowed by the game. They reduce the sensitivity and the FOV to the absolute minimum. We zoom in the screen 16 times more than normal, and we try to get the crosshair as close to the middle line as possible. Not only that, but we also account for which pixel of the eye of Ender is bigger than the middle one to mitigate possible approximation issues, and just so slightly decrease or increase the angle given by the line of the eye of Ender. Now, the eye doesn't just point to a random place in the Stronghold, but it directly points to the center of the starting staircase chunk. So basically, we don't have an almost infinite amount of possibility, but a finite grid of chunk centers. But what happens if the line goes through 2 Stronghold centers? This is where this very ugly integral comes in. It calculates the probability that the eye was pointing towards the nearest Stronghold when considering the player position, angle and distance from the center using polar coordinates, and the estimated Stronghold position. That's why sometimes the probability is not a perfect 100%, but it's honestly pretty unlikely that it gets a 50-50 scenario or something like that. Then we have to account for the fact that we don't actually have a theoretical line, but due to human input we have a sort of cone, which might hinder the precision. Fortunately, the calculator takes this into account by adding an error with a normal distribution. Okay, sorry if I really bored you, but I'm trying to give this paper from Ninja Brainbot justice for the amazing job. Plus, it's not my fault you have a TikTok brain. You guys always trick me like this. I can't do this anymore. Was my guess like good? Am I ready for a YouTube apology? Anyway, yeah, this is the rough idea I got. Also, thanks to this video from Dima, I think, which had me confirm that what I said and corrected the idea of the line I had, because in practice it's more imprecise than a line. Please go check him out. I left the video in the description. Also, when we only throw one eye, we only risk one time the 20% chance of them breaking, which is crucial considering that we only have 12 eyes, and going to kill another one or even more innocent blazes would slow us down. Now we are almost done. We go back to the Nether, we use the coordinates to travel directly inside of the Stronghold, and again, with the same F3 shenanigans used to find the blaze spawner, we can find the silverfish spawner right next to the end portal. Honestly, I am kinda oversimplifying. It can be tricky to find a portal, but this is not computable, so we can't account for that. Here we might want to hunger reset if by now we are out of food, which is a very nice way to say kill yourself now! And honestly, it's still a waste of a tiny bit of time, but it's often used to mitigate the fruit problem. Not a lot of people know that the chance of you finding a single eye pre-placed in a portal room is not actually 10%, it's more like 37.6%, because each portal frame has a 10% chance. By using the same distribution used for the blades, we are able to calculate the actual odds of finding each case. The chances of you finding at least one eye is 71.76%, which, just like when I found out the percentage of income you ships pay the Illuminati government when you don't evade taxes, is way higher than one expected. Also, this implies that if you have 12 eyes and you throw one, you have a 5.9% chance of it breaking and your portal not having an eye, and this basically kills the run immediately or slows you down because you have to kill more places. So now we're finally able to enter the end. Ah, the end, where strange colored dudes want to fight for no reason and the sky is always black, basically like Atlanta. Okay, if you want to complain about my jokes, just remember that I am Italian. I was already punished by God. Anyway, yeah, end strategies. There are basically two methods speedrunner used to kill the dragon. The first is the classic one cycle. You wait on the side of the island that the dragon perches to, which means it comes down to the bedrock mortem portal, which I'm sure is some sort of, I don't know, metaphorical expression of the life of poet Edgar Allan Poe, I think. Then we use our beds to deal damage to the dragon with the explosions. And done. GG, easy, adds 200 pumped, comboed, montage. The odds of the dragon perching after it finishes a path she does around the pillar is 1/3 plus the number of crystals alive, which means that usually you don't break any of the 10 crystals on top of the obsidian pillars. If you have a 1 in 13, a 7.7% chance of the dragon purchasing after its first path, and another 1/13 after the second, and then you've probably lost too much time already. I know, brutal. The second and arguably more luck-based method is the zero cycle, which looks something like Basically, as soon as you enter the end, you throw 2 pairs to quickly get on top of an obsidian pillar, hence why more than 12 pairs were needed, and tower up to build a 2 obsidian setup in a predetermined position that changes for each type of pillar, and there are 10, where the dragon is going to stay immediately after spawning. Player must use the pillar since they would not get this high on their own, and they also need to be very precise because the time window for this trick is extremely narrow. The funny thing is that depending on the island and pillar generation, it might not even be possible to zero cycle. Now before we get into this final stretch, I want to thank and shout out T-Wags, who made a cool video explaining this part, and Matthew Bolan, the creator of the end dragon movement visualization mod. So anyway, when you enter the end, the dragon spawns at the center of the end island, and depending on the height of the towers on the east and west side, he chooses the direction to go. Based on the end obsidian platform spawn point thingy, the dragon might come near us, and runners call this a front dragon, or away from us, the runners call this a back dragon. One problem with this method is the variability. I've told you that the dragon follows a path, but
I lied.
in reality, the dragon deterministically chooses one of these nodes, which is like a destination, and travels towards it. Then, it chooses another and reset a bit. So for example, at the start, based on the height of the pillars, it chooses to go back or front. Then, it has an 87.5% chance of going towards the pillars situated diagonally from it, and a 12% chance of staying somewhat in the middle. A zero cycle in the middle is theoretically possible, but there is no setup or anything right now that allows you to do it. So at least for now, it's practically impossible. So we have already a 12.5% chance that this trick is not doable. Now I won't go into details about the nodes, but just to know that for the dragon to satisfy the condition, it has to fly closer than 10 blocks away from a target block that spawns randomly in a 1 to 12 blocks above the node's Y coordinate. Not only that, but the node themselves spawn precisely 16 blocks above the surface of the end, and that's why even the end terrain generation can affect this. And ironically, possibly the most crucial thing is the obsidian towers. 10 of them spawn in each end, but there are 10 variations of towers, so 2 different ends will always have the same towers, but the location of each individual tower is always different. This means that for each pillar there is a setup, and that we care only about one tower at a time, the diagonal front or back, depending if the dragon went front or back. I told you earlier that my degree was really easier than this shit, bro. Not only that, but since destroying a crystal would interrupt the movement required for the zero cycle of the dragon, you also want to be far enough from the top of the pillar, but not too far away where you would be too distant from the node. So to make it simple, too close is not good, too far wastes too much time, and the dragon flies away. I feel like speedrunning is just a logistical nightmare, man. Also, lower towers, like the one T-Wags referred to as Small Boy, please don't take this out of context, need you to tower up a lot and not make the crystal explode. This makes it so you have to waste time to pillar up, and if the target plot of the end dragon is high, the dragon will satisfy the condition of the node and fly away. Each pillar has its own likelihood, which were calculated by T-Wag. I know that at the start of the video I said I'd try to calculate myself everything, but this depends on trial and error and on other variables that I simply don't know. So I will use T-Wag's probabilities, and again, thanks to him. Last thing before I give you the actual chance, there is this pillar called T94, which makes it physically impossible to zero cycle. If I was speedrunning at a world record pace and happened to saw this pillar on my zero cycle, I'd look for the closest fan and hang myself with the mouse cable. Also, for higher towers and cage towers, it's harder to complete the zero cycle because you have much less time to complete it or to travel efficiently to them, making some setups much harder than others. So 10% chance of a 1 impossible tower, 30% chance of having cages or high back towers, 35% chance of having bad node or a dragon movement or an island generation luck. We have an empirical 25% chance of a zero cycle even being possible in the first place in any given end. Not to mention, the cycle must be perfectly executed under world record pressure, which is a whole other monster on its own. But if you manage to do it all, well, congratulations, you might get a shot. So overall, the moment we've all been waiting for. What are the chances of a top runner getting the necessary luck for a world record? To recap, we need to find a world with a buried chest next to spawn. We have a 56% chance of it having all you need. We need to find an underwater ravine near spawn, which I tried to look for a shot in this video and it's much rarer than I thought. We need to find a bastion near the Nether spawn that has an average of 20% chance of giving us everything we need. It's a bit higher for bridge and a bit lower for stable, but on average it is true. We also need to find a fortress nearby. We have a 25% chance of getting lucky with the blades rod. If not, we might lose too much time. A 94% chance that we have all the eyes we need to enter because none of them broke. A 25% chance of even being able to zero cycle, or a 7% chance of a really fast 1 of 13 dragon perch. No bad luck in finding the portal in the Stronghold. Not a single death to piglins. Fall damage, end mistakes, perils, breaching, good terrain. It's absurd how much luck you need on top of the thousands and thousands of hours of practice to even have a chance at this. I want to end this video by saying that even these numbers are somewhat wrong. Runners constantly make decisions on the spot that can deroute them from theory, and there is so much variability in general. For example, I did not account for terrain generation that can lead to time loss. Depending on it, in fact, we might even have small time saves that add up. Moreover, the speedrun meta keeps getting optimized with better understanding of strats. Proof of this is the fact that I had to redo an entire section. I'm still mad about that. And every day, routes and small techniques like eating while entering the portal to shave off milliseconds pop up. I'm sure the runs will get lower and lower over time. Also, runners have an incredible adaptability in every possible situation, and that's what I do believe to be the most important skill in this category, because you can get a bit unlucky or have a world-shattering run dying to some stupid bullshit. Hello, Skycrab? Well, this aged like fucking milk. Although there was a joke on Skycrab expenses here, I'm truly glad he got the world record. He probably deserved it more than anybody else, so yeah, congratulations to him. I guess speedrun really teaches us that with perseverance and hard work, in the end, we will always prevail. I guess what I'm trying to say is too much RNG!